Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday, where we meditate each week on some verse from the Proverbs, with an eye toward maximizing our wisdom, and for me at least, replacing some of the old junk in my mind with good stuff. This week we're looking at Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9 and 10, which says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain, and your vats will overflow with good wine." Now let me read that one more time. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain, and your vats will overflow with good wine. Yep, we're going to talk about money today. Can you handle it? Let's look at the first part, which is verse 9. It says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce." What does it look like to honor the Lord with your wealth? Part of it can look like tithing. Tithing is giving the first 10% of all of your income to God. And if you think I'm making up the 10%, just know this: the word tithe actually means 10%. It's not some mathematical formula that was dreamed up by pastors and church boards to make sure all the bills got paid. And I won't go into a big long thing about tithing here, but it is a real biblical concept. There are scriptures to support it, and if you're interested, you can study up. If you're not, me talking about it in a 5-minute video is not going to change your mind, am I right? But my understanding is that tithing is one important part of honoring God with our wealth. Now, some people think that the 10% has to go all directly to the church, to one church. What is your home church? And some people split it between a church and various parachurch ministries and missionaries. And I know some people who really love the Lord but are not about church for one reason or another. And I've seen some of them get very creative in how to give their tithe to God. And I'm not here to settle the debate about where your tithe goes and how that goes to God, but I will just stick with the basic thing. The tithe is an idea from God, and it's not from people. But is tithing the only thing that we need to do in order to honor God with our wealth? What about spending the money that I have ethically, the money that I don't tithe? Are there ways that I can spend my money that dishonor God? I think so, don't you? Should God be invited into the process of formulating your family budget, or even, deciding on individual purchases? I think it's worth considering at least. I know someone who keeps between $5 and $20 in a special compartment in their wallet that is not for them to spend, and they call it their Jesus money. And it's held there until they come into a situation where they feel led to bless someone spontaneously in the moment. And that might be either meeting an urgent need, some critical, desperate thing, or it might just be doing a nice thing for someone who needs a nice thing in a moment. Now, you notice that person has to plan for that spontaneity. If they don't put the money in the secret compartment, it's not there for the spontaneous moment. So they planned. But I promise you, they have big fun dispensing those funds. I feel like that honors God. And notice it says, the best of everything you produce. Do you consider God in the best stuff you produce? Does it point to God? Does it honor God? Do you think God is glad about the best stuff you produce? Is the best stuff you produce maybe your gift to God, actually? And then let's look at the promise part. It says, "Then he will fill your barns with grain, and your vats will overflow with good wine." Now, filling your barns with grain, I think, is a picture of having enough for now and also enough for the days ahead. Whether you have actual barns and an actual harvest, actual grain, or not. People get nervous with these kind of promises, am I right? I mean, I have. it can sound like the prosperity gospel, you know, those people on TV that are trying to get you to send them money and, you know, promising your next big miracle just around the corner. But here's what I found myself, despite that icky feeling sometimes about the way that people talk about this. I have found that the more intentional I am with setting up my tithe to come out of my check before I even touch my check, and the more I approach my financial decisions prayerfully instead of only thoughtfully, and you know, just the more I factor God into my day-to-day financial decisions, I figure and I discover that this promise is, it's a real thing. It's a thing that happens. I find that my money somehow goes further. I find myself keeping up better with my financial obligations. I find that I get happy financial surprises more often, and that others are more likely to be merciful toward me when I do need a break on something financially. I also find that as I stick with it and persevere with it, even when it's hard, I find that I'm growing in financial wisdom, and I promise you, I sometimes thought that would never happen. It's not as hard for me now to do the right thing, the smart thing, the thing that'll bring better results in the long run. And I have found that seems to be connected to my willingness, you know, to tithe and to pray about my finances and to invite God in to every aspect of my financial life. And also, can I just note for a minute here, let's just notice this, that the promise for your vats is wine. I mean, I know we don't have big vats sitting in our homes anymore to store water and wine. But the promise could have been just for sufficient hydration, right? Couldn't it have said, you know, your water vats will always be full? So for me, the promise being wine, it seems like a promise of joy, a promise of fun, a promise of richness in our lives. You know, not sparse, Spartan, stiff upper lip, suck it up buttercup and quit your whining, you've got enough already. Not like that. Like abundance. I want abundance. You want abundance? I think these scriptures point to a path forward to abundance. Before I go, let's run through these verses 3 times to start to get them cemented in our heads. So, you ready? Here we go. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain, and your vats will overflow with good wine. And a second time. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain, and your vats will overflow with good wine. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain, and your vats will overflow with good wine. Now, go out into your day meditating on what God wants to show you about these verses today. Soak up that wisdom, and I will see you next week. Okay, in the video you might have heard a sad, sad song in the hallway. This is Chester Bing, the singer of sad songs. We're very proud of him for the loudness of his song that comes shining through on my highly spiritual videos. Thanks and have a nice day.